He basically made me unemployable from the very start. Cocky 20-year-old is going to get humbled. And that is exactly what happened. Like, I was earning 4,000 a month at the BBC, and I think the coffee canister was doing like 100K a month.
The Amazon account.
The Amazon account was shut down.
The whole thing.
The whole thing was shut down. I was never in control of what was going to happen. I could have never predicted. Maybe life is trying to tell you something.
Welcome to Fireside, where we sit down with successful founders every month in order to capture their stories, insights, and lessons learned along the way. Hit the follow button and subscribe to our newsletter for more, link in the description.
Thank you for being here. So you went from being a farmer in rural Wales to building and exiting e-commerce brands to now being a co-founder in AI and real estate.
Yes.
Sounds very exciting. And I want to start right at the farm, and I want to know how life was on the farm growing up.
Life on the farm, I think it was amazing. I think it was an absolute privilege to be brought up on a farm because I just learned so much because I was in nature. I was outdoors all the time. I was working with my hands. I learned how to have practical skills. I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. And I think that what was really genius is the way that my dad brought me up on the farm, because he never, ever made me feel like he was my boss. He had this way of teaching me. He would just show me what needed to be done, and then he would just stand back and let me do it myself, let me make my own mistakes. He would let me decide when something needed to be done and how I would do it. But the problem with that is he basically made me unemployable from the very start. And I think the other cost to this way that I grew up is that I grew up in this kind of bubble where I was so loved and so supported, had amazing parents, and I felt like a prince in this kingdom. But the problem was, it wasn't real. And at some point I had to step out of that bubble. And I can tell you my first day in primary school was pretty rough. And I think that that's probably why I ended up becoming such an introvert. And I think that to this day, I'm still getting used to life outside of the farm.
Mm-hmm. I think you're quite used to it by now.
Still working on it.
So you were expected to stay on the farm, inherit the farm, grow that, and then what happened next?
I think the big turning point, as you said, I thought I was going to be a farmer, 100%. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about learning anything else. All I cared about was tractors and cows. But then one day when I was 20 years old, my parents decided they were going to go away on vacation for the first time ever. And guess who they decided to leave in charge of the farm?
Phil.
Me. And I was super excited about the responsibility. And I can remember when they were leaving the yard, it's so embarrassing to think about right now. But the last thing that I said to my dad in this silly voice, I said to him, "Don't worry about a thing, Mr. Williams. Your farm is in good hands." If you saw that in a film, you would think the cocky 20-year-old is going to get humbled. And that is exactly what happened. Because at 25 to 5 that night, I was in the milking parlor. And the guy that was working on the farm came and told me that there was a problem with the straw chopper. A straw chopper is exactly what it sounds like. It is a machine that cuts up straw and spits it out as bedding for cows. So this was a problem that had happened various times, and I knew what to do. Just turn the machine off and you clear it out. Except this time, when we turned the machine off, what I didn't realize is that the blade inside was still spinning round. So I put my hand in, and then bang, I just felt this blow on my hand, and my middle finger was just literally hanging by a thread. And you can see this hand has never quite been the same since. And the funny thing is when I took my hand out and I saw it dangling, the first thing that I thought was, oh my God, how am I going to finish milking tonight?
You blue skied it, more or less.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm glad you're fine, by the way.
Yeah.
And then what happens next? You're like, okay, I'm done with this. Was it immediate or?
Well, I ended up in a hospital bed feeling very embarrassed, very ashamed, and thinking about what had happened. And the words of a mentor of mine came to my mind when I was in hospital, a man called Michael George, who was a farmer, but incredible man. And I remember hearing him say, Phil, it's a hell of a bloke who can turn a setback into an opportunity. And I was thinking this in the hospital, thinking I can't possibly think how this can end up being an opportunity. But I ended up going home and then I canceled my studies for the year and I realized that I was going to have a year of just doing nothing. And the obvious thing to do would have been to just keep on working on the farm, doing the same thing. But somehow something inside of me felt like I want to do something with this time. I just didn't know what. And then the answer came to me one day in the form of my mother. She came in and showed me this newspaper advertisement, and it had 3 questions. And to this day, it's pretty crazy when I think about it because it's like it had been written for me and my circumstances. There were 3 questions. It was, are you aged between 18 and 30? Would you be interested in studying and working in a foreign country? And would you be available in spring this coming year? And for me, the answer to every one of those questions was hell yes, and hell yes. So I applied for it. It was called the Leonardo da Vinci program. And then I ended up in Spain, living and working in Spain. And as luck would have it, I was allocated to live, not with a family, but with a young couple, not that much older than me, 2 people called Alex and Nuria. And they're still friends to this day. And I think probably still the greatest people I've ever met in my entire life, just incredible people. And because of this, I felt a lot of motivation to learn Spanish. So I was putting in all of the effort that I could. I'd never done this before in school. I was looking for extra classes. I was walking around with a dictionary everywhere. I was writing down words, trying to memorize them, and just putting in as much effort as I possibly could. And a funny thing happened. I started to get better at speaking Spanish. And it seems strange, but it was a shock to me because when I was in school, when I was learning stuff in school, it all seemed a bit pointless. Like you learn something in school and you never quite know why. Like spent a lot of time learning Pythagoras' theorem and I'm still waiting to see that be useful in my life. But this was very different because I was learning something and then instantly I could see how it was valuable to me, how I could integrate it. And this gave me a confidence that I'd never had before. And on top of that, it was the experience of living with people who didn't have cows. So they had days off. When 4 o'clock came, they weren't looking at their watch thinking, we've got to get back and milk. These guys had weekends off. It blew my mind completely. And I think it really changed what I wanted out of my life. So you add the confidence that I got from learning and getting good at something, the experience of seeing life outside of farming, and also the effects, kind of the souring of having a farm accident. I mean, like, there's nothing like an industrial accident to make you a bit cold on an idea.
Yeah, it's life-changing accident anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're in Spain, but I know you also became a journalist with the BBC.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went from Spain directly to the BBC?
When all of this happened, it meant that I was looking for a different future in some way. And I landed on the idea of becoming a journalist for terrible reasons. Some of the reasons were okay. One reason was I was quite good at English in school. Another reason was I didn't want to be in an office. So the idea of running around and reporting on stories seemed attractive. And then the other idea is that I just felt like it was a way to get a lot of validation and feel better about myself, which of course was a terrible idea. But those were the reasons that I decided to go into journalism. And within about 2 years, I was working in the BBC.
Okay. So you were doing exactly that, running to cover stories and avoiding the office, being
Yep.
outside.
Yeah, reporting on old ladies being beaten up in Swansea, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, all uplifting stuff.
Okay, so you did good as a journalist?
For a while. It went well for a while, but it became apparent to me that what I really wanted was to be a reporter. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, but for a lot of reasons that didn't work out. And then I got transplanted to doing TV documentaries. And that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And on top of that, I was never suited to working in a big organization. The guy who can't have a boss in this big bureaucratic organization, it was never going to go well. So the BBC, it was great for like a 6-month honeymoon, followed by like 9 years of hell. I hated it.
Wow. Okay, so so you're having a discussion with a colleague of yours who turned out to have a great idea, or at least inspired you in a way.
Yeah, this is another sliding door moment in my life. I was making a documentary about a con man who was ripping off farmers as it would happen. So I did my work, did the research, filmed stuff, and then I had a meeting one day, and it was me, my assistant editor, and my editor. And we had to decide when we were going to broadcast this program. I wanted to just get it out of the way. My assistant producer also said she wanted to get it done. But my big boss, the editor, she said, no, you're going to do it later and gather more material. And that meant that I had a different picture editor working with me in the studio. So we were editing this sequence one day with this farmer crying. And the picture editor next to me, Charles White, he goes to me, I don't understand why these farmers don't just do something more profitable. And I said, well, what are they going to do? And he started to explain to me that his wife's stepson was buying products in China and then selling them in the USA. And I started asking him some questions about it. And then eventually I said, I think I would like to speak to this, Dan. And then I asked the next day, and then the next day. And then one morning, Charles turns up to the edit studio in his biker's latex, like he always did, his spandex. And he said, good news, Dan is going to talk to you. So Dan Ashburn, as it turned out, he's become the most famous guy for teaching people how to sell on Amazon. But back then, he was not that guy, and I ended up being his first student. So I ended up selling on Amazon, and that tiny decision, more than anything else in my life, of when that program got broadcasted, completely changed the future of my life.
Okay, so you're not immediately selling on Amazon yet. You first, you were trained by him. He was your teacher, you said, or coach, or?
Yeah, he basically just mentored me through the process.
Okay, he told you how to buy products in China and sell them in the US through Amazon.
Basically, yes.
And you paid him for the training.
Yep.
But then you came up with a product idea.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that, and what was it?
I like drinking coffee, and I just found that I was buying coffee beans, and they were just making a mess in my cupboard. So one of the things that when you learn to sell on Amazon is think about your own pain points and the things that you touch. So it just came to my mind that I'd had this problem of messy coffee grinds everywhere. So I researched the product of a coffee canister, found a supplier, and launched it on Amazon, and it started selling, which was incredible. It's the best feeling of my life of just, of all the time that I tried entrepreneurial things in the past, none of them had failed. So to sell something on Amazon and see it get sold profitably, it was another one of those moments that blew my mind.
Yeah, and so it started selling immediately. Did you do something? Did you have a strategy?
Not really. I was very lucky that in those days that selling on Amazon was so easy that you could basically put a product up and it would start selling. I literally had no branding. It was just a stainless steel coffee canister straight out of China in a brown cardboard box. That was it.
Okay, so there was nothing special about your coffee canister versus the other ones.
Only that there was not many competitors at that time.
Okay. Okay. So okay, great. So it never works like that, right? Like when you start a business, it's always very hard in the beginning to lift off the whole thing. So
Amazon was a different,
Mhm.
it was a different beast.
What year was that?
That was 2016.
Okay. So it starts selling well, and how well? And you were still on the job with the BBC, right?
Yeah. So for about a year, I was still working at home, working in the office, working at lunchtime. And I remember there was one time when there was like some emergency and we had to work really hard on some program that we all had to turn around, and everybody was in it together. And I was in the corridor on the phone to Amazon seller support because my listing got suspended. And it was that point I realized that it wasn't sustainable anymore. Like I was earning 4,000 a month at the BBC, and I think the coffee canister was doing like 100K a month, something like that.
Okay. So you were doing 100K a month on Amazon,
On
4K
one
a month,
product, yeah.
4K a month with the BBC. The decision was quite easy.
Yeah.
Was not one of those where you like had to sleep on it or anything. That one was like just you quit.
It took a while until I was stable and I realized that
Okay.
this was a thing that I had to nourish and take care of.
Mhm.
And even then, when I said that I was leaving, I had to give a notice period, and I was working on a program that never got finished. And to this day, I still dream about that program. I still dream that I have to finish that program. Sometimes I think that I need to go back and work voluntarily for the BBC for 2 months to make a program.
Just to finish it.
Yeah, it's like karmically, I owe it to them somehow.
Maybe they found someone else, but
Yeah, maybe I wasn't that important after all.
no, no, I'm sure you were. But anyway, so okay, your coffee canister was called Coffee Gator.
That was the name of the brand, yeah.
Okay, it's doing well, it's selling, and then you decide to sell it.
No, I added other products.
Okay.
I grew the company, grew the brand, and I got to a point where it just wasn't growing anymore, and I was running out of ideas. And the thing that nobody tells you about an Amazon business is that you can be turning over a lot of money. Like Coffee Gator, one time, it did like 800,000 one Christmas. But the amount of money that I had in my bank account was nothing, because all of the money is tied up in inventory. So I always felt that even though I had a successful business, I always felt this fear inside of me that sooner or later I was going to have to go back to the BBC. So by selling the business, even though it wasn't at the best time, not by a long way, it gave me a kind of confidence that I was not going to have to go back to the BBC. I was not going to have to make that documentary.
To get that lump sum sitting there, you know that you're covered for a while. I'm curious, how big was the business when you sold it in terms of employee, if you had employees, and revenue?
I think we had like 10 or 12 people working for it, probably turning over like 400,000 a month, something like that.
400,000 a month. And you sold it for, was that a 7-figure exit?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you find the buyer, and how was the negotiation phase?
Finding the buyer was really easy because there was this bubble in Amazon businesses of people buying Amazon businesses and then aggregating them, and it all blew up. But the first one on the scene was Thrasio, now bankrupt. And so I just called them and spoke to them. And that experience for me was very, very difficult because I was so intimidated. It wasn't that long since I was just a journalist. And negotiating and selling a business with these people who seem really important, it was really hard for me. And unfortunately, because I didn't have a lot of experience, and by nature, I was very conflict avoidant, and then I kind of got pushed around a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But like most things, when it comes to toughening up, unfortunately, the only real way that you can get toughened up is to get slapped in the face a few times. So that experience just taught me a lot. And when I went through it on subsequent periods, I realized that I built up a lot of skill and a lot of resilience and a lot of knowledge in that process, and not something I ever thought that I would be good at.
So you said you got pushed around a little bit in the negotiation, you mean?
Yeah.
But you still secured a really good deal.
I secured a deal that was good for me at the time, but it could have been a lot better. And the timing couldn't have been worse. It was the height of COVID panic in 2020. It couldn't have been worse timing.
Do you have a quick example of what it meant to be pushed around in the negotiation, like a tactic or something that was used against you? Or
Yeah, it's a pretty standard tactic that we negotiate a price and everything was set to go through. And then at the last minute, they say, oh, because of all of this uncertainty, we're going to have to cut 50K off the deal, something like that.
Well,
So it's effective because selling a business is such an emotional process. It's highs and lows, and you just, by the end of it, you're a wreck. And the buyers knew that. They knew that I was just in such a bad place that they could just pull the rug from under me and I would come running, and I wouldn't let that happen now. But at that time, who I was and where I was at that time, I just didn't have the resources or the experience.
yeah. And a lot of those negotiations, it's about who's in a power position
Exactly.
and who's in need and who's not in need. And
Yeah.
yeah.
At the height of COVID, trying to sell a business, I was not in a good position.
Yeah. Okay. So sale done. Congratulations. Then you were like, okay, I'm gonna start another one. Or was there a time in between?
No, part of the strategy of selling Coffee Gator is that the problem with coffee making products is that there's only like 5 good products. There's a kettle, there's a canister, there's a grind, like only a few things that you can sell. So I realized that I was kind of boxed into a situation, and what I needed to do was start another brand. And I love the idea of supplements because people just buy them all the time. You buy a bottle of supplements and then you buy another. You buy a kettle and then you're pretty much done. So before I started selling Coffee Gator, I'd already started work on this other brand, 2 other brands in supplements. So by the time I sold Coffee Gator, the next brand was almost ready to launch. So it was pretty seamless in that way. The team stayed on with me, and basically we kept doing exactly the same thing, but instead of selling coffee products, we were selling supplements.
Okay. So how did that do? How big was the team?
It was the same size team. It was like 10 people.
Okay.
And a bit like my BBC career, it was amazing for about a year. And then the brand grew really, really quickly and did great. And I was really close to a big exit within 18 months of starting that business. And that deal fell through because the aggregator market was just about the bubble was about to pop. And so the deal fell through, and I thought, never mind. I still have a business that is growing super fast and is profitable, and I can still sell it. And then one morning, I woke up and I had a WhatsApp message from one of my team. And I knew that was bad news because they only normally contacted me through Slack. And they said, the account's been shut down.
The Amazon account.
The Amazon account was shut down.
The whole thing.
The whole thing was shut down. And not only was the account shut down, but Amazon had taken away all of the reviews for my products. So it's like the worst nightmare of every Amazon seller. It's like the thing that you don't even want to think about. That ended up happening. And so I think it's fair to say I didn't take it very well.
Yeah.
It was a pretty stressful situation.
So how did that? Yeah. Tell me more about that. I'm curious. Was there a reason? How did you fix it?
Yeah, the thing is about selling on Amazon is it's always been a bit of a Wild West type business. If you just follow all of Amazon's rules, you don't get to sell anything. Or at least that's the way that it used to be. So back in the beginning, it was okay to give away products for reviews, and then it wasn't. And I was giving away products for reviews, and unfortunately, it coincided with a time when Amazon was really cracking down on that kind of thing. So I think basically I got made an example of, because plenty of people got shut down for reviews. Plenty of people got their reviews taken away and then they got them back eventually, but I never got those reviews back. So it was extremely painful because although I got the seller account back, the business was never the same again. And it wasn't just the one blow. Because reviews are so fundamental to the business, it just meant that for like a year, I'd look at the sales and they'd go down. And then I'd look again and they'd go down. So it was like this 10 months of complete torment of just seeing the business falling away. Melting, yeah.
Okay, so when they gave you your account back, they never gave you the reviews back. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you try to appeal that?
Oh, yeah.
Nothing.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried everything that I could. I even went to Seattle in person to an Amazon event and talked to the executives. And
Really?
yeah, I did everything that I could. So I just wanted to know that afterwards that I had done all that I can to try to get the business back. And I know that there's nothing more that I could have done except for maybe taking an executive hostage. That was probably the only thing that I could have done.
That's not part of the terms of service on Amazon. Could you do that?
I don't think so. No, they're a bit funny about that kind of.
Okay, so but you still managed to exit that business.
I still managed to exit that business.
How did that go?
That was fortunate. I got approached by a private equity group. So this was a very different deal. When I sold Coffee Gator, I just sold the business, walked away from it and had nothing to do with it. Selling to private equity, it was a very different kind of deal. I sold half of the business and then myself and the team were to stay on to try to grow the business with another exit afterwards. So it was a very different kind of exit and a very different set of circumstances. But it didn't really work out the way that I hoped it would. Or I think it goes back to the problem that my dad set me up of not being a very good employee. Because when you work with private equity, like it or not, you have a boss. You have people who are asking you for reports, asking you why you did this, asking you why you did that. And I'm just not cut out for that kind of thing.
You don't like to answer to anybody.
No.
Free spirit.
Yeah.
Okay, so the business was valued at 8 figures when you made that deal, right?
Yeah.
So you still ended up with a good exit.
Yeah. I would say that I snatched some kind of victory from the jaws of a crushing defeat.
Mm-hmm. That's quite impressive.
I think it was just lucky.
Did you do better with the negotiation?
Oh yeah, way better. Way better. Because by that stage, that was the third time that I'd gone through this negotiation process. And I had a lot of experience and I was also in a stronger position. And yeah, I was just better at it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I never expected to be any good at those kind of negotiations, ever.
So do you have one tip about how you got negotiation better? One tip, like if you were to give only one.
Well, it's not very helpful. It's just that you have to do it. You have to experience it. Because as I said, my biggest problem was that I was so intimidated. I was so conflict avoidant. And the only way to get through that was actually conflict. It's like so many things in life. You just have to embrace the pain.
Exposure therapy.
Yeah. I heard a great quote the other day. It was, a wound is where wisdom enters your body.
Yeah, makes total sense. So you're done with the exit. You're done with the Amazon business at this point.
No, I still own equity in that business.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to finalize that deal like in the next few months, hopefully.
Okay.
But I am not in control.
So this is like the second part of the deal.
Yeah.
It has to be finalized in the next few months. Okay. Is that dependent on anything happening in the world right now, or is it just the business performance?
Well, what's happening in the world doesn't help.
Exactly.
It makes things less stable, makes people scared to make an investment and buy a business. So I really don't know. There's nothing I can do about it other than take care of myself, and that's it.
Yeah, of course, and cross fingers. How did you become a co-founder in AI and real estate? And what does Vericasa mean? And this is the name of the startup, right?
Vericasa, yeah.
So what does Vericasa mean? And how did you end up there?
What Vericasa does basically is when you sell or buy a property, My business partner, Rodolfo, is here. The whole team is here. You have 4 documents. I feel nervous explaining this in front of Rodolfo because he's the one who always explains this. You have 4 documents that have to be analyzed. You have to check all the data is right, cross-reference them. And of course, here in Portugal, usually the data is wrong. So analyze the documents, create a report, and then create contracts for the final sale. So if you ask a lawyer to do that, a lawyer is going to take like 3 or 4 hours of their time. And realistically, if you're dealing with a lawyer, it's going to take them like days. Whereas Vericasa more or less does that in 3 seconds.
Okay, so how does it work? Does it use AI to do the analysis and all of that? Okay.
Yeah. Don't ask me anything more technical than that.
No, please. Maybe the Q&A, they'll have technical question. No, but okay, so how did you end up in this business?
There was another slice of luck. I'd read a book called Ready, Fire, Aim a couple of years ago. And I'd always been pretty scared of the idea of partnerships because I think that they're pretty dangerous unless even if you know the person that you're going into business with, there's just such a high chance that it's going to go wrong somewhere. But in Ready, Fire, Aim, the author talked about a certain type of partnership that he'd had a lot of success with. And basically, he would find somebody that he really believed in, who had an idea and had a lot of energy. And he would say to them, okay, you do the work, I'll put in the money to get it started. So one day I was having lunch with my friend and business partner, Rodolfo, and he was telling me about this idea that he had for making this whole process a lot easier. And he was like explaining documents and this kind of stuff. And to be honest, I didn't really understand it. But what I did understand was Rodolfo. I'd worked with him for probably like 2 years by that point. And he was just an absolute animal, an absolute A player. And I always think like, how many people do you meet in your life that you would really want to invest money in? It's not that many. But Rodolfo was one of those people. So he was having some troubles and I just said to him, it was almost like an offhanded comment. Why don't we just go into it together and I'll put in the money to get it started and you do the work. And he was like, yep, let's do it. So that was where it started.
So you're not doing the work?
No.
Okay. But this is a very interesting what you just said, because one of the best practices of investment is invest in the team or the people, not necessarily in the idea, because you know that even if the idea is not good, they'll make it work or make the next idea work.
Yeah, I really struggled to get my head around the idea and if there was a demand for it. And I was saying to Rodolfo, like I wanted to know that people wanted to buy it. I wanted to like test it with real estate agents. And I remember one real estate agent telling me that it was just a stupid idea and there was no need for it whatsoever. And I told Rodolfo it and he said, people just can't get their heads around it. And in the end, I just decided to trust the jockey, to trust Rodolfo. And it turns out he was right. When it was actually built and people could see what it does, it just blows people's minds.
So how's it going now?
It's kind of amazing. And it's just so different to what I've been used to in the past, because on Amazon, you put on a crappy coffee container and it starts selling, you start making money.
Not anymore, but
Not anymore. But you create an amazing product. And when you're doing deals with, when you're B2B, it's a very different pace, especially in Portugal. Like you have a meeting and then they need to talk about it and then they wait for 2 months. So that side has been challenging. But on the other side, we've had so much success with it already. So many doors have opened. Like we only just got the tool built and we were having meetings with the boss of Remax in Portugal.
Remax, the real estate.
Yeah. We've done a deal with the biggest real estate agency in all of Europe. And on Friday, we're going to be announcing a big partnership at the SIL real estate exhibition. So really, it's been embraced in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And the funny thing is that with this supplement business, I think there was so many things that have happened in my life. I never made the decision that I wanted to stop being a farmer. It was just kind of made for me. And I never made the decision that journalism wasn't for me. It was kind of made for me. And so with the supplement business, I really started to see how it didn't matter how good the work that we did with the supplement business was, how much effort we put in, we didn't seem to get any kind of results. But on the other side, I was starting this thing with Rodolfo and things just kept on falling into place. And I always remember reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And he always talks about follow the coincidences. So it was like a year ago, I was realizing, wait a minute, I'm working really hard in this thing here. Nothing is happening. And I'm not doing that much here. And all of the good fortune is happening in this direction. So maybe life is trying to tell you something. And maybe you should just try and focus your efforts in this direction instead.
It's very interesting because your business was successful, the supplements business, and you had a great exit deal, and you still view it as it wasn't doing as well as you thought, or can you?
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of story as Coffee Gator. I sold it at the wrong time. The business did well, and then it started just kind of shrinking. I couldn't find a way to make it grow. And still, I kind of somehow managed to snatch some kind of victory from it.
But isn't that maybe more about where you're putting the bar versus what the reality of the business was? Because it's done very well.
You could say that, but in both circumstances, I can see with both businesses, if I'd sold at a different point, I would have had a lot better exit. So I think that I should be grateful about how well that I've been able to do despite all of the bad choices that I've made. And yeah, I think that it's not always easy to be grateful. It's always easy to be ungrateful and to see what you didn't get rather than what you had.
Well, is the glass half full or half empty? I think it's half full.
Yeah.
Okay, so how's Vericasa doing in terms of like how big is the team and or market share, or
Well, it's still pretty early days for Vericasa.
how old is the company?
We launched the tool like a year ago at the event last year. So, like I said, we're doing deals with the biggest real estate agencies. We've got a team of salespeople. We've got back-end developers. It's probably like 8 or 9 people or so at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like how many people work for you is not a metric that I'm really concerned about. I really care about how profitable is the business. And really, I would rather, if it could just be one person, that was what I would rather. I think that number of employees often is a vanity metric.
So of course, and even more so with AI now.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to have $1 billion companies run by one person.
100%, yeah.
I don't know who said that, but I didn't invent that, so someone else said it. What are you, if you look back at this exciting career path you've had, what would you change?
I think that when I look back, I think that the mistake that I have made over and over again is just taking too much advice from people, listening to too many people. And I realized this a couple of years ago when somebody said to me that most of the advice you get is bad. And he said, if you think back to all of the advice that people have given you in your life, there's been a lot of it, right? You've had a lot of advice. How many of those pieces of advice can you think back and think that was a good piece of advice?
Probably a handful, and I know exactly why. It's because you're usually in a very specific case, wherever it is that you're working on or happening to you. It's so specific that almost nobody has been in a case that's exact and that specific to give you proper advice that is relevant.
Yeah, and the other problem is that you can make a bad decision and get a great outcome. And you can make a good decision, get a bad outcome. Doesn't mean that you should copy that. I put my hand in a straw chopper, and that was a very bad decision, but I had a very good outcome. That's an extreme example, but people get confused. They think because they had a good outcome that they made a good decision. So it's very complicated. And when I look back, I listened to too many people. And And it's mostly because I didn't know anything, especially about business. So I was looking to try and learn, and my mindset was almost always, I was so ambitious. It was, tell me what I need to do and I'll go and do it. But I had no filter about who I was taking advice from. I just believed that everyone else knew better than I did. And it turns out that most of the time that was not right. I knew my own circumstance better. It was just kind of hidden down there below limiting beliefs and stories and all other kinds of nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And so if you had to give advice to someone who wants to start a business or take a leap of faith, would that be it? Do not listen to everybody, or you have something else?
Well, I think in the spirit of what I just said, I would hesitate to give advice to anybody.
That's perfect.
Somebody once told me that you should listen to the advice that you give everybody and write it down at the end of the day, because that is really advice that you have for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have advice, you're giving advice for yourself, then it's not really much. If I'm giving advice to you, but it's really advice for me, it's not going to be very useful for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so what are you thinking of doing next? You're the co-founder in Vericasa right now. Is there any other project in mind? Do you want to write a book? Because I heard a lot of inspiring stuff today.
No, I've always thought that maybe someday I'll write a book, but I think it's a logical thing because of my journalism background, but I don't really quite know what I would write a book about yet. Maybe one day it will come to me. Maybe it won't. But Vericasa is enough to keep me busy and just always trying to be a better version of myself, trying to be a better man. And unfortunately, there's plenty of work to do in that direction. There's plenty of places where I can be a better Phil. And I would say that I don't make a lot of plans anymore, because if there's one thing that I've learned from my journey when I look back, is that I was never in control. I was never in control of what was going to happen. I could have never predicted. I could have never have predicted that I would go from Spittal in West Wales and be living in Lisbon, Portugal. There's just no way. So any plans that I made at that time, if I'd have held on to them tight, that dream of being a farmer, I would be in a very different place. I'd be a very different person right now.
It's very interesting because all the coincidences that happened to you somehow ended up being a good thing. It's not always the case, but you must really believe in intuition, or how do you view that?
Well, I think about those words of my mentor of turning an opportunity around.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when challenges happen, that there's usually the seeds of an opportunity or something new that is happening at that point, if you look for it. If you suffer well and you look at the opportunity, often you'll find it. There's a phrase that I really love from Nietzsche. It's called loving your fate. And he says that whatever you're going through, it doesn't matter if your life is a complete wreck, is having the faith that that is what I need. And seeing it, not hating it, but seeing it as a puzzle, something to be solved, and finding the strength in it that way.
Yeah, another famous psychologist, Alfred Adler, also, I think he pioneered that idea, or was very big on it. It's not what happens to you that matters, it's what you make of it and how you view it afterwards that will actually end up determining your future.
The problem is, it's super easy to say. It's really easy to say when everything's okay. And I know, I say this right now, like I know it, but I know that the moment that something happens to me, my instinct is not going to be to step back and go, oh, this is all going to work out and I need to learn something here. No, I'm going to be probably going to be a whiny little bitch for a while, but I'm going to have to struggle to try and pull myself out of it.
But that's normal. I mean, what's happening in the markets right now, it's exactly the same thing. Everybody's panic selling, but those who will make a lot of money out of it are those who are buying at those levels. But it's so counterintuitive because emotion takes over, panic takes over. If you see everybody else selling, why would I be the one buying? That's why very few people make it in those situations.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think of it like a snake charmer. The markets are like a snake charmer and investors are like the snake. You start a snake charmer, the market starts playing this tune. And even though the snake doesn't want to, it starts getting hypnotized and acting in a way that it doesn't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil? Thank you very much, and keep believing in coincidence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
We turn over the mic to you. Any questions you have for Phil? Now is the time.
I'm curious, you said you feel very good about this current business now, Vericasa, what's the name?
Yeah.
But when you were starting the other two businesses, at the time when you were starting, you felt equally good as well, right? What is the difference now and back then?
Sorry, can you rephrase that?
So you say you feel very good about this business now,
Yes.
but you also said that you felt good when you were starting the other businesses, the
Yeah.
other two.
Yes.
So what is different now and then?
Well, you just said that they're the same. I felt good at the start, so maybe I might not feel so good about Vericasa in the future. That's what you're trying to say. I can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, I was worried about that actually. I thought you had something more now than before.
I can't tell what the future's going to bring.
All right.
Also, I feel like your involvement in Vericasa is different from your previous businesses.
Totally.
You're not an operator.
No.
So,
No. We'd be in trouble if I was the one in charge of the legal paperwork or the development.
there's Rodolfo for that. Other questions? There.
So thank you for the conversation. You mentioned you overcame a lot of limiting beliefs, and I wondered, how did you overcome them? And then there's a second bit to the question, right now at this stage, what limiting beliefs do you still have, if any?
Oh, I'm sure that I have many, many limiting beliefs. And I think that the problem with limiting beliefs is that you don't see them. You don't know that they're there. You don't know that you're being boxed in by them. And the moment that you can start to see them is when you can start to challenge them and to take away the legs from them. So when you asked how to overcome limiting beliefs, I think the first point is to actually see that you have them. And sorry?
In your case, what made you see them?
I think that it's a really strange process about limiting beliefs because, for example, I had a limiting belief for a long time that I couldn't start a supplement brand or I couldn't start multiple brands on Amazon. And it probably didn't matter how many times people told me or tried to tell me in a different way. And one time I just paid for a coach who helped me kind of craft a whole vision for my future. And she just pointed out that I loved making brands. And for some reason, probably that limiting belief, I'd been kind of smashing my head against it for a long time. And then just one day, just something kind of clicked and it was like, oh yeah, I could do that. Why can't I do that? So there's no easy formula. It's just slow and painful. And I think the first thing is just seeing that you have them and then afterwards just really thinking about it. One of the things that I've really learned over the last year is how many of my thoughts are just complete nonsense. How many stories that I create. And when I start actually if you write down a story that you have, like I can't do X or whatever, and you start asking yourself questions like, is that true? Do I know for 100% that that is true? Maybe you think you do. And then how do I feel when I feel that? And how would I feel if I didn't believe that thought? You start walking through those steps. You start realizing that the stories and the ideas and the beliefs that you have are just built on nothing. And they kind of have this habit of just evaporating.
Thank you.
A lot of these things compound with time.
Exactly, yeah.
You hear a thing here, another there, then you think about it a little bit, and some time goes on, and all of a sudden it clicks.
Yeah.
Just how they compound sometimes.
Yeah, it's really weird, the process of learning something and actually embracing it and actually knowing it.
Mhm.
It just takes a lot of time. You can read something in a book and you can tell somebody else and you can make somebody else think that you know it. But until you actually live it, there's a big gap. And
Absolutely.
reducing that gap is not easy.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question because listening to you. So first of all, thanks. It's really inspiring hearing the story from your perspective, and having all these revelations. What I just sometimes wonder is, it's lonely at the top, right? So as a founder, and I wonder all these critical situations you've been facing in terms of making the decisions of selling, of maybe continuing and partnering up. Who were your sparring partners, or who was your support system during that time? Because it's very inspiring what you're saying about getting all these revelations and making connections to the alchemist, which I love. It just, yeah, it's lonely at the top sometimes making these critical decisions. So who was there as your support system? Or did you have a support system? Or did you create one?
Well, first of all, I would say it's lonely at the top is a limiting belief in itself. And for me, it has never been lonely in my business. One of the, as well as all of the obscene luck that I've had in different places in my life when it comes to business and career, the other obscene luck that I keep having is the people that come into my life that I work with. So in my Amazon businesses, I had the outrageous fortune to hire somebody who's just a complete A player. I absolutely had no right to have somebody like that working for me. She was just so much more experienced, so much smarter than me. And it really forced me to level up. And I don't understand why she worked for me and why she continued to work for me for so long. But she was just an absolute godsend because I never had to go through anything alone. She was always right there beside me, giving me her advice, giving me her opinion, supporting me right the way through. And again, I did nothing to deserve this. It was just like this absolute godsend. And now working in Vericasa with Rodolfo, he and I are talking all the time. And when it comes to decisions as well, I think that one of the mistakes I used to make is I used to think that I needed to have the answers. But what I realized is if I just ask the person bringing me the problem, a lot of the time they know the answers, but they kind of, either because I'm the boss or because they just don't have confidence or they didn't really just think about it themselves. When I turn the answer back and turn the question back and ask them their opinion, then usually they've got a really good answer. Like Rodolfo sometimes comes to me with problems and I just say to him, like, what do you think? And then when Rodolfo starts giving me an explanation about what he thinks, I say, well, let's just do that then.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I'm always looking to outsource and ask other people who have more specialization than me. And my job is not to come up with all the answers. It's more to ask the right questions.
Well, thank you for the conversation. I have two questions, actually. So the first one is you mentioned, and it was very interesting, that you are an introverted and you were conflict avoidant before. So it's very common to say that people that are extroverted, that they like the conflict, that they go and get the things they wanted, they are better in entrepreneurship, or they are the most outspoken ones, that they like to do networking and this kind of stuff, like social stuff. But how did you cope with this? How did you learn to address a conflict and to actually solve problems? You can answer this question, and yeah, I can
Okay.
do the second one.
How do I deal with conflict as being a introvert? That's your question, right?
Yes.
I think it comes back to the same uncomfortable truth of you just have to do it. And I remember I had one really difficult situation when I started Coffee Gator, first of all, and it was very, very, very stressful for me. And I just didn't know how to deal with it. And I ended up, I knew I was going to have this really, really difficult conversation. And so I spent the whole weekend planning the conversation. I wrote down exactly what I was going to say, and I thought about exactly what the other person could have said, and I figured out my answers. obscenely over-prepared for that conversation. So it meant that when I went into the conversation, I had a certain level of confidence because I'd researched it, I'd done my work. I had the conversation and it was not as bad as I expected. But then on the other side of that discomfort, I was never as conflict avoidant ever again. I feel that that conversation helped me to grow. So I remember reading once that a lot of the good things that you want in life are on the other side of a difficult conversation. So I think that it just comes down to leaning into that and finding a way to get used to it and lean into your edge. And if that's being really weird and preparing the whole conversation in advance, like I did, or whatever works for you, I think that it all comes down to what works for you. And I think that for a long time, I felt frustrated that I was this introvert and I wanted to be a different person. I wanted to be the party guy, but it's taken me till now to just kind of accept that is not me. I am who I am, and I have to learn to approach problems and approach situations with the tools and the personality that I have, because I'm never going to be anyone else.
Great, thank you. Well, the second question is, you mentioned also that you don't like to be told what you have to do, like you are the boss. So in that case, I kind of identify as you, but I want to know, how do you cope with the situation? Because eventually you will need to work with someone. You will need to be told what you have to do in order to collaborate in your business. So how do you embrace the situation?
Well, if you're collaborating with someone, you're not being told what to do.
Yeah, but for example, in a field that you are not expert in, and you need to implement some advices or some things that you don't know, but the other person does. So how do you keep the situation going?
Well, I think you're not being told what to do if you're asking somebody for their help. That's a different scenario. And I think that unsolicited advice is a complicated subject, because I've realized that I try not to give advice to other people, especially when they don't ask for it, because it is never welcome. So if you're speaking to somebody that just wants to tell you what to do, then I would say that's a problem in itself. And they're not necessarily the type of person that I would want to take advice from. So again, it's a different situation if you're actively looking to learn and you're actively asking that person to help you versus the person who just tells you what to do or tries to control you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the openness and all the stories you share with us. Much appreciated. Also your mental journey, your journey of your soul. One question. So I do run a business myself, and I always wonder what's the role of purpose in my business? Because when you start a business, at least in my view, you start a longer journey, most likely, and you need to wake up and feel a certain purpose. So what was the role of purpose in your businesses?
Purpose of my businesses was to make money.
Okay, this was the motivation to get you up every morning and say, let's do it.
Yeah, I think we live in a strange world where we want things, like we want money, we want recognition, we want sex, but we're ashamed to say that we want that. So we're in this kind of in-between thing. That's why people talk about the business is not about money for me, it's about this, it's about that. But I think that it's a healthy thing that if you prioritize money in your business, because you can't have a business that has purpose if you don't make any money. To have a healthy business, purpose can be part of that. So I think that being okay with this is a business that I want to make money out of is okay. I think it's that simple.
Okay, and did it change over time, the latest business? Since you're financially potentially more secure or more stable through your exits?
Yes. What I would say is that when I started, I was much more confused about the purpose. I was on this weird flight of fantasy that I thought I was in the coffee making product business. And I wanted to have a purpose of having the best coffee making products in the world. And that just all led me to make a lot of bad decisions. So when I started on the supplement business, I was a lot clearer that I was starting this business. And yes, I wanted good products. I wanted to help people. I wanted to create something that would make people smile. But the number one priority was making it profitable, because if it wasn't profitable, it wasn't a business. And now in Vericasa, it's different in that I don't have the same need to make money out of the business. Of course, I want to make money out of the business, but the business still has to make money. It's not a business if it doesn't make money. So the number one goal of Vericasa has to be for us to be profitable, because if we're not profitable, we won't exist. We want to make something. I hate bureaucracy. I really hate bureaucracy as much as I hate having a boss. So it's important to me that we have a tool that simplifies and takes a lot of the nonsense out of selling a property. But we can't do that unless it's profitable. So I think that it should be the North Star of maybe every business.
I heard once, if it's not profitable, it's a hobby. It's not a business. Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I just think that people make things a lot more difficult for themselves because they don't feel right saying, I started this business because I want to make money. And that introduces a lot of complicated ideas and making bad decisions like I did, trying to sell coffee making products in shops all over the world, which was just impossible. If I'd have just sold more products on Amazon, I would have been a lot better off.
Thank you.
Someone back.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Nino Rodolfo.
First of all, thank you very much for the kind words. Second, let me put things straight. Phil does work. He does the best at Vericasa. He's constantly saying it doesn't work, but it's not correct. Phil, besides being my business partner, friends, and whatever we are now, we are more than friends, I guess. Really touched my life in ways that very few people have touched. So reach to him if you need willing to improve something in your life. Best advice ever. I've taken it, and it took my life 10 times better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodolfo.
Hi, thank you so much for all the insights. I'm loving this discussion. I was wondering, throughout your path, throughout your journey so far, what is the most unexpected leadership lesson that you've learned, and how has it impacted the way you lead yourself, the product, the teams?
I think the most important leadership concept that I have learned is that you can run enthusiastically in the wrong direction. And as a leader, I don't have that many important things that I need to do other than that one thing, which is make sure that we are not running enthusiastically in the wrong direction. Or as an old farmer I once heard say, he said, you can dig a hole and you can fill it back in again, which means you can work really hard doing something that makes absolutely no sense. So my role now in Vericasa, I don't know about legal paperwork. I don't know about property. I don't know about coding. But the only thing that I do know is that we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of different directions that we can go. And I know that it is crucial that we choose the right direction that we head. So I see that as my role as a leader in the company of stepping back, seeing all of these moving parts, and trying to make a decision on what is the right way to go. And it's very difficult. But if you don't take a step back and think about it, then you end up just running in the wrong direction, which I've done so many times in my life. And when that person came to work for me, Irina, who I talked about earlier, I think that was her number one frustration that she had with me, is because I had no leadership skills. I would just hear one thing and say, we need to do that, and then that, and then that. And then people would just be running around in all directions trying to do stuff that didn't make sense to them because I was just disrupting everybody. So I've really had to learn to step back and take a bigger look at the bigger picture, and to choose some things you can do and some things you can't do, and to try to be focused and try to make the best decisions that you can.
Thank you. So for many of us, that direction is a vision. Is that something that you would advise for business owners to follow, or would you focus more on the business KPIs and metrics that make the business healthy and profitable?
I think that you have to know where you're going. I think that's the most important thing. And then when you know where you're going, you have those KPIs, those metrics to know if you're heading in that right direction. I think that it's like having the numbers and having the data. It's like being in a plane and having all of the knobs and dials and understanding, are you heading in the right direction? But there's no point having all the knobs and dials in the compass if you don't know the direction that you're going. So I think that knowing the direction, more or less having an idea of what you're trying to achieve is the number one thing. And then everything else should be orientated in moving you in that direction, ideally as quickly as possible.
Got it. Thank you.
We'll take one last question. Like,
Hi, Phil. I'm Mike. So you were a farmer and a journalist, and I'm wondering because we all, like everyone here, has a story, and we all have our paths, and those stories, those paths, those coincidences that you guys talked about are shaping us into who we are and how we lead the businesses, right? So I was just wondering, do you see anything from your like farming time and then from BBC time? Was there anything that from those times and those experiences impacted how you were building those businesses, and now you have your AI startup? Is there anything, any learnings, any analogies, any stuff like that?
Yeah, 100%. Everything. I mean, being a farmer, first of all, is problem solving, and it's being practical and figuring things out, and also to some extent being a leader. And those skills helped me in the BBC, and the BBC is very much about communication. And I think that I had a lot of weaknesses. I still have a lot of weaknesses as a businessman, but I think that the skills that I learned in communication from the BBC really helped me. Making a documentary, it's basically just one project management assignment. So making a TV documentary and making a coffee canister is not that different. It's a process of, you go around, you speak to a lot of different people, you kind of craft your ideas, you figure out what you're going to do, and then you're going to make it, and then you're going to launch it. So there's a lot of similarities. So I think that anything that you do in life, if you start a career and you do something, the skills that you learn are never wasted. They just kind of get repurposed and they compound into whatever you do in the future. I think that's just absolutely inevitable.
Phil, thanks again. This is great.
Thank you.